Senate, there's the Board of Trustees, and there's the University Council. I think that's the three. In terms of Senate's the one that incorporates elements of democracy into it. You're welcome to sit in and listen. You're welcome to, students sit on that, and anyone can go, and I encourage you to go. The other ones are not so democratic, and they're more decision-making based. That's my knowledge of them, and that's the way the system's currently set up. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. So in terms of the governing bodies, as Jeff mentioned, we have University Council, we have the Board of Trustees, we have the University Senate. I think those are the three main bodies, and how I would use those bodies is collaborating with other students, other student leaders from different faculty societies, the rector, the undergraduate student trustee, the SGPS even, and having a consolidated front when approaching those bodies. We need to make sure that, for example, the financial situation of the university is not jeopardizing the academics that are affecting currently at Senate. And so we need to make sure that when we are talking about Senate, we also include the undergraduate student trustee and what's happening in Board of Trustees. We need to take a look at the entire picture, not just at each individual governing body, and we need to be doing this in the grassroots level as well. We need to do this in the different bodies and committees that the Board of Trustees has and different committees that Senate has. And we need to be able to know which students are sitting on those committees, what is happening, get a good picture, and approach them as a consolidated front. We need to work closely with the faculty societies, and we need to work closely with AMS Assembly and the different assemblies that are across this campus to create discussion and be able to represent students as much as possible. It is not only about what it is that we want to do, it's about what students want, and that's what we want to do as Team GPP. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the question. So, as it has been mentioned, the three governing bodies of the university are Senate, University Council, and Board. I'm going to answer the question a little bit differently because we have talked about them quite a bit tonight. But first, if there's one thing I want to drive home about what we said about it so far, Team JDL really believes that in order to be an effective representative on these bodies, you really have to participate. So I'm going to continue now with what I believe to be the governing bodies of the AMS, if you don't mind a little spin on the question. There are two main governing bodies in the AMS, Assembly and the Board of Directors, but I believe that there's a third advisory body that we really need to pay attention to. I don't know why I'm looking at you, you didn't even ask the question. It's President's Caucus. For those of you that don't know, President's Caucus is a caucus chaired by the President of the AMS, where representatives from each faculty societies, usually the presidents, hence the name, sit down to discuss major issues at Queen's University that affect individual faculty societies and the AMS as a whole. I think this is a really underutilized opportunity. It's a really underutilized resource because there's a lot of collaboration that can come with this. A lot of the faculty societies are relatively small. They have small student fees, small budgets, and are unable to compete with massive corporations like the AMS on campus. Bringing these people into a room on a consistent basis breeds more collaboration. This is where I first learned about the Con Ed GPA problems. This is where I first learned about sponsorship issues in some of the smaller faculty societies. And this is where I first learned about nursing society and nursing students having trouble getting into electives. Raising these issues as President's Caucus is the perfect forum to do it because every faculty society has different resources and every faculty society should be sharing them with one another. After all, we are all students and we shouldn't be differentiated by our faculty. We should be sharing these resources, we should be sharing what we have with each other, and we should be breeding collaboration within the different faculty societies. Thank you.
Rebuttal, RMS.
It appears that once again I forgot the second half of your question. In terms of how do I approach the admin, the three different boards, once again, I firmly believe in listening and empathy. I know that in my role with Finers, I work with student affairs quite a bit, and every time I walk into the office, they're really happy to see me. And we work together, and we accomplished a lot this year for Finers, creating our first ever mailing list. And also, I would like to say that in terms of what JDL said, President's Caucus, that came up on our banner, and actually that's a great idea.
All right, guys, I'd like each of you to pick one platform point from one of your opposing team's platforms and tell me why it has no merit. Be specific and don't use this as an opportunity to plug your own platform. Thanks.
Has no merit. Beginning with GPP. As a reminder, any candidate may respond to a question. GPP.
I think in terms of no merit, in terms for a platform point, I think we've made it clear in terms of the discussions that have been happening earlier on. I think that would have to be the reopening of the PEC. I think this is something that is completely unfeasible. It's not within our control. We shouldn't be promising something that is beyond our hands. We are up for challenges as well as Team GPP, but we recognize what's realistic and what matters for students right now. There are other priorities that we need to be looking into right now, and the university realistically doesn't have the money to reopen a building that they couldn't even give us a quote on how much that would cost. If they can't give us a quote with how much it would cost, it means that should be something negative. It should be something that they don't know how much it's going to cost. It's going to be a lot of money. And so we need to focus on what really matters, academic quality, use that money to preserve our programs at Queens. We had the suspension of the Bachelor of Fine Arts program because of lack of funding within the Faculty of Arts and Science. And so I believe that if we cannot afford for $100,000 to keep, sorry, that's pretty funny. If we cannot afford $100,000 to pay for a professor who's retiring, how are we going to afford at least $2.2 million per year on just maintenance costs for the PEC? Yet on top of that, how much are we going to afford? How are we going to afford the money that it costs to reopen it? Are we going to have to cut more programs? Where is this money going to come from? I think that's the point that has the least merit out of the platforms that we see here. Thank you.
JDL.
Thank you very much for the question. In terms of platform points that don't have any merit, I think I'm going to focus on GPP's platform and the rugby league that they want to create. The AMS is a $16 million corporation. I don't think, sorry, let me start again. A rugby league that can really only operate for 4 weeks in the fall, as though there may be many students that would participate, I don't think this is the jurisdiction of the AMS. This seems more like an intramural, this seems more like a sport, this seems more like something that athletics and recreation should be doing themselves. If there is enough information, or if there is enough interest, let's let them do it. Let's focus on things that students can't get inside of athletics and recreation. Let's focus on things that students can't get inside of the club system already. If we want to make new opportunities and new resources for students to take advantage of, let's not expand on something that we already have. I know Queen's University has several rugby teams, and I'm sure there are hundreds of players that are already involved in the rugby league, or the rugby team, sorry. And this is something that athletics and rec should be focusing on. If you want to lobby athletics and rec to do it, by all means go for it. I'm sure they would love the opportunity, but let them do it. This is not something the AMS should be focusing on.
RMS.
Thank you for the question. I'm happy no one criticized our platform. Gotta be, okay. Anyway, so in terms of offering some commentary, I think I'm going to focus on JDL. Just the library and blue light apps, I really think that there are alternatives that you could look at. In terms of the blue light app, I think that it would be more important just to make Frosh aware of campus security, what the number is, have every Frosh program into speed dial. I don't think that having an app specifically, because while you said on the website not everybody has a smartphone and not everybody has a computer they can access the website on to do so. And in terms of the library, I really think that offering more study space is a better solution, such as opening Wallace Hall, which is already being done anyway, but that's something that I'd like to support and continue. Thank you.
Rebuttal, GPP.
All right, just in response to Doug's comment regarding the Queens Rugby League, I think that on page 15 of our platform we mentioned that we understand that in order to establish something like this, we have to be working in close collaboration with athletics and recreation because of their exclusivity on oversight of sporting events happening on campus. I did meet with Jeff Downey and with Dwayne Parliament. They're in charge of intramurals. And so we are focusing at this point in working directly with athletics and recreation. It wouldn't be the AMS alone. We have to do this especially for insurance purposes. Thank you.
Rebuttal, JDL.
Great, thank you. I actually just wanted to comment on the PEC. Sorry, let me get my mic first. So we recognize that this is a very long-term plan. This is something within our vision that we want to look to for the future. I know something we touched on a lot last night is that we really need to push the boundaries. We need to challenge ourselves or we really won't get anywhere in the future. And I'd like to start this with actually a quote from Alan Harrison, the provost, who said, "I think we are still committed to a vibrant student life center at this university and one that supports the learning environment appropriately." I think this really does prove that the administration is still committed to some kind of student life center in the future, and we would really like to make this a priority for them, given that we do not have phases 2 and 3 of the Queen's Center for the Future as well. Thank you.
Rebuttal RMS.
All right, I told myself I wouldn't use a quote tonight, but I can't help it. I'm going to quote a quote that was quoted by Principal Wolf yesterday at Senate. It's a Francis Bacon quote. He basically said yesterday, "Our budget system is like a piece of God. It surpasses all understanding." If the administration currently can't understand their own budget, how do you expect them to finance a new project of this size?
Rebuttal JDL.
Great, thank you very much. So yes, we do realize that this will be an expensive project. I think like we said last night, having spoken with the Vice Principal of Facilities, Ann Brown, and Ivan McKean, who is the Business Manager for Physical Plant Services, we actually don't know the exact cost of this building project. However, we do know it's something that is very much so supported by many parties at the university, including the University Registrar, Health Counseling, Disability Services, and Athletics and Recreation, who, to reference actually a conversation with Athletics and Recreation, they have stated that if needed, they would bring us an army of varsity athletes to help reopen the PEC. Thank you.
Are there any more rebuttals?
Can we rebuttal ourselves? No.
So one more question that was submitted by a team. It reads, to the presidential candidates, to date, what has been your biggest failure as a student leader? What do you consider to be your greatest weakness coming into this position? Please refer to matters of character, not knowledge. Starting with JDL.
Can you repeat the first part of the question?
I'll reread it. To the presidential candidates, to date, what has been your biggest failure as a student leader? What do you consider to be your greatest weakness coming into this position? Please refer to matters of character, not knowledge.
It's a very good question. Greatest weakness, I'm going to start with character, not knowledge. I think the greatest weakness I would have, and I've been told this by a number of people, and trust me, I'm working on it, is often I come across as arrogant. And trust me, I know you guys keep telling me, it's not because I am arrogant, I think it's just my presentation as a person. This is how I've learned how to speak growing up. Anyway, moving on, I'm working on it, my team tells me every day, and they're... my greatest failure as a president, oh, this is a good one. So, when I was Internal Affairs Commissioner at ASIS, I had... There was a very important piece of policy that I didn't put into, that passed at Assembly that I didn't put into policy. It had to do with Arts Sci Formal and tickets, and Vice President's laughing at me because I was busy doing other things on my computer at the time, and I completely slipped my mind that it had to go into policy. Don't give me that look. Anyway, the only reason it was a big failure is because it caused a lot of problems in the future. It had to do with Arts Sci Formal tickets and who got free ones and who got half-price ones. It caused a few problems the next year when I became president, but when I realized my mistake, that I hadn't put it on policy, it was pretty simple to go back. Well, not pretty simple. It caused a lot of problems there as well, to go back through. And it just helped that we had a permanent staff that was there for a historical perspective and institutional memory to help me out. I learned a lot from that. I learned I need to pay attention at all times. I learned that I need to do my job 24/7. But I also learned that if I ever slipped up, resources and people and support are there if I need it. That is what is so great about Team JDL. We're always in full support of each other. We constantly criticize each other. We often disagree with each other, but we know it's in the best interest of the team and the best interest of the students. So I hope that answer was sufficient. Thank you.
RMS.
Thank you for the question. So in terms of my biggest failure, I would say that, well, in second year, I was both an exec on Finers and teach in Con Ed, and I didn't do that 2 years in a row. I was like, whoa, man, you can't do this. And in terms of my biggest weakness, I'd say that I'm a little bit idealistic. I believe that you know, I'd love to live in a world where everyone cared about one another and everything worked out just fine. I realize that's not the case, and I'm working on that. Thank you.
All right, thank you for the question. I guess in terms of biggest failure would have to be last year when I was recently elected to my position, coming to the ASUS Assembly with a project in terms of the Alpine Tower, which I'm sure many people have heard before. And I think the biggest failure there was not consulting with students prior to Assembly. And this is something that I have learned, and what I want to continue to do next year, and I have done this year, is consulting with students ahead of time before bringing things to Assembly, of things especially of that magnitude. I think that has been my biggest failure and how I've been addressing it. In terms of biggest weakness, I think I'd have to say that I'm an extremely positive person, and I think that can be taken in a negative way when I focus a lot on what's going well rather than necessarily what might be going negatively. And so I think I need to just focus on some of the more negative things so we can improve the society as a whole. I think that would be my one weakness there of character. Thank you.
Gracie Goad, HNS Director. If one of your running mates dropped out immediately after your successful election and you had to select a replacement from one of your opposing teams, which member of another team would you choose as their replacement and why?
Starting with RMS.
Sorry.
But I like my teammates. You know, if I had to, they voluntarily left. That's what we're saying. Is that what we're saying? Okay. If they left of their own accord, I'd have to say that I'd really like to commend TK. I think that he's you know, he's debated really well for the past couple of nights, and he challenged us to Catan. So you're on board.
GPP.
All right. In terms of who I would pick, I think it would be Sean Renault. And I think that would be because of his life experience outside of Queens. He's obviously worked in many different places. He's a vast experience in mental health. And I think that would be one of the reasons for why I think he'd be extremely suited for the job and would be up for the challenge as well. And he's been extremely friendly during the entire campaign. It would be somebody that I would love to work with.
Very interesting question, Gracie. I would also say TK. We actually consulted as a full team. This is a team decision, not just mine. If someone did drop out of this team, we would all feel most comfortable if TK stepped in. His experience and knowledge of social issues on campus and even working in the Social Issues Commission would be extremely beneficial, especially at a vice president level. There's no telling which one of us would drop out, so it could even be a presidential level, but that sort of experience and knowledge would be extremely beneficial for the society, for council, for assembly, and so on. Thank you.
I do take bribes, so keep that in mind.
The next question comes from Twitter. The AMS Constitution bans members from frats. 2 fraternities exist in Kingston, outside of Queens, with AMS members. Is Clause 7.01.13, which defines this policy, obsolete? Starting with GPP.
What's the question?
I'll reread it. The AMS Constitution bans members from frats. 2 frats exist in Kingston with AMS members. Is Clause 7.01.13, which defines this policy banning AMS members from joining fraternities, obsolete?
Okay. Thank you for the question, whoever made it through Twitter. I think that it is not up to us as an executive to determine whether a clause or a policy in policy manual is obsolete. I think it would be up for discussion with the AMS Assembly, AMS Council, consultation with students. We can't just come and say, you know what, this is obsolete. It was similar to the question asked by Tuba regarding the drinking age of 18 and lobbying to the government that they should decrease that. So I think that would be the way that in which we would approach the situation. It would be bringing that to AMS Assembly, creating discussion, generating dialogue, and bringing feedback from students. I don't think we can determine it on our own.
Which way?
Thank you very much for the question. I would say that portion of policy is not obsolete. In fact, it just needs to be revisited. I think what we should do to address this situation is consult the students, talk to these so-called fraternities, and find out exactly why they're on campuses, what services they provide, and whether or not they benefit students or whether or not they are detrimental to the inclusivity that we hope to foster at Queen's University. The AMS, as a student government that represents 14,000 people, needs to help create a very inclusive campus, and it's possible that these fraternities are creating some sort of negative vibe on campus, and it needs to be readdressed. If I'm not mistaken, I believe there is some information in the Royal Charter that actually created Queen's University that talks about fraternities on campus and creating an inclusive environment, and that's something we need to revisit. This is something that we would do. We would consult all of the students that are part of these fraternities, students that are not, students that are member of social clubs or other sort of clubs on campus, to find out exactly what they want as students and what the AMS can do to offer them that. With that said, we need to make sure that we foster as inclusive an environment as possible, and it is also very possible that these fraternities are going against the mandate of the AMS.
Thank you for the question. I would absolutely agree with what Rico said in terms of how it would be an assembly decision to change a policy manual. That's 100% on board there. In terms of my personal view of fraternities, I think that fraternities tend to lead to an elitist culture, and I think it's very bad for community because often in fraternities you get the situation where people are forced to do things they don't want to do, and hazing and the like. And personally, I don't want to see them be introduced.
Hello. All right, so this is to all teams, anyone on the team. The campaign period is really your first test as a team to see how you work together and how your values come through. In such a long and demanding process, mistakes and misjudgments are inevitably made. I would like you to describe one thing about your campaign or one decision you have made during the process that you would change and why.
Starting with JDL.
Great, thank you for the question, Ty. Sorry, to clarify, you're asking one mistake that we think we've made in the campaign that we would change, correct? Okay. So I think one thing we kind of all talked about together a lot today was that this campaign is really about pushing your hardest until the very end. You have to put in so much effort and so much passion into this campaign period in order to accomplish your ultimate goal. One thing that we all really agreed upon is that it would be, and I think all teams could kind of attest to this, it would be impossible to go through this campaign process if we didn't care about the society and the jobs that we are running for. It takes a whole lot of not only courage, I'd say, but also passion towards the society and these jobs that we want to do in order to get there. So in terms of a mistake, I would say one thing that we've had, perhaps today even, and we've been doing class talks all day on every half hour as much as possible, and I know there have been a couple today in which we felt that we couldn't make it to the class, ended up doing something else instead, doing debate prep, for example. I think one thing that we need to ensure that we're always doing is pushing ourselves to our highest and ensuring that we set standards and set goals for ourselves every single day that are always evolving. One thing that we really believe in is putting in our greatest efforts at all times. So if we're going to set a goal of doing a certain number of class talks one day, let's raise that bar the next day and ensure that we can always work harder. And that's something that is very applicable to these jobs during the year as well. The jobs really do start now, and this campaign period is really the time to prove that we are capable of pushing ourselves to our limits and farther at all times. And we really should be challenging ourselves, and I know we keep referencing this, we do need to challenge ourselves in order to learn, and that's what the society is about. Thank you.
RMS.
Right, so I'm going to first talk a little bit about what I like about our campaign. I like how closely we've worked together to really make this happen. We did our video ourselves. We man our booth ourselves. We always make sure one of us is there. We have one volunteer, and he's in the room today. And our entire platform we wrote around a coffee table. And we did so without campaign managers. Today we were interviewed by a journal and we were asked to describe our campaign in 3 words. And we came up with honest, friendly, and creative. A lot of people like the way we've run our campaign, I think, and I'm happy they like it. The banner idea came up when we were having dinner at an Asian restaurant. Anyway, but one of the criticisms I'll say of our campaign is that we didn't schedule class talks early enough. The other teams jumped on the ball on that one. So oftentimes we'll get emails back from professors saying, sorry, it's already been taken, a lot. And it's hard for us to get our message out there. So if there's one thing I would change, I would have done that a lot earlier and earlier than the other guys. Thank you.
GPP.
Thank you for your question, Ty. What a great question. It really made us think. First of all, I'd like to say that the campaign process so far has been amazing. We've learned so much. It's been a great experience. And I would say that our greatest downfall so far has been not expressing to our volunteers how integral they've been to this campaign. We've been so busy running around doing class talks and boothing and talking to students that I don't know that we've made them feel fully appreciated. From our campaign manager and other managers who work consistently, to our volunteers who man the booth, to people who simply share our video. They really are the heart and soul of this campaign. We couldn't do it without them. They've helped us in so many ways, and I feel like we haven't made that clear enough and publicly clear enough at this point. It's something we do regret. I hope you guys know there's a lot of you here right now. I hope you know what you mean to us and how much we love you. And I think that that's something we should have said earlier. Don't cry. If you cry, I'm gonna cry. And I think that because of this, the team has really recognized how important it is when you're running a society to take that time and really appreciate your volunteers and see that the society doesn't function without them. You may be in an executive position, but you aren't the society. Your volunteers are. We may be running this campaign, but our volunteers are the integral pieces to putting it together.
Next question comes from Twitter, from Edward Ryder. The Journal has been accused of deciding the outcome of past AMS elections due to their editorial endorsement. What is your team's opinion of the endorsement and its role in voter choice, and how do you feel it will impact your team? Starting with RMS.
Our general feeling about the Journal endorsement is that if you look over the past endorsements, they seem to forcefully support the team with the most experience, and we really feel that there are other considerations than purely experience for this kind of executive role. So in that sort of way, I think the Journal has not considered other factors sufficiently. However, they are an important body in terms of really getting to know the teams, checking what the teams are doing. So I do still think that the Journal endorsement should exist.
Thank you for your question that came through Twitter. I guess in terms of our thoughts on the endorsement of the Journal, we have to understand that the Journal has editorial autonomy. We can't just really be telling them, you know what, you shouldn't be doing this or you should be doing that. They have their own ed board and they should be able to decide what happens. This is something that happens in real life as well, in a way that it can be, I guess, like some teams might consider it problematic if they don't receive the endorsement, but I don't see I think that this can be improved in the future here at Queen's with other media services taking that same stance. I know QTV is going to do that same thing this year in terms of endorsing a candidate, and it's something that happens in real life. They have editorial autonomy in terms of content, in terms of what they decide to publish, so I think it's up to them to decide.
Great, thank you for the question. So yeah, as Rico just mentioned, actually, I was going to touch on editorial autonomy. I think that's something that's very important that is kept to the Journal. I think the Journal's mandate is really to hold this organization accountable and to hold the university accountable to the student body. And that's something that I think is crucial to the running of this fantastic organization. So as Rico mentioned, there is the existence of an editorial board right now, which does make all decisions on editorial content of the Journal. To touch on oversight that the AMS should have over the Journal, I believe that it's very important that we do have financial oversight. Given that the Journal receives a mandatory student fee every single year of around $6, it's very important that we do remain financially responsible and that the AMS holds financial accountability over the Journal as well. Having said that, to answer the question, I think it's very important that that the journal's endorsement does remain if they wish it to. That really should be their decision, given that they do have this autonomy. To add to what Rico said as well, I think it's extremely important that in the future our other media services are able to expand and gain their boards of their own. So I know that QTV expanded a ton this past year, and they are endorsing a team this year. It would be great for the service if they had their own editorial board in the future as well. Given that they right now, in terms of finances, report to the board of directors, it would be really fantastic in the growth of this service to see them have an editorial board in the future, perhaps their own Q board. Thank you.
Hi. Anyone can answer this question. So as you know, the various faculty orientation weeks serve the purpose of transitioning students to academic, social, and community life at Queen's. However, for many students, the 3 to 4 days of orientation week is not enough to adequately transition all students to university life. What initiatives, if any, do you plan to implement to assist students in transitioning to university life beyond orientation week itself and throughout the rest of the year?
Starting with GPP.
Thank you very much for your question, Anjali. I think this is something great that you've mentioned in terms of continuing orientation week past the first week, past queer orientation week as well, different events. It's not just about the week. We have emphasized the importance of GALES, for example, within the Faculty of Arts and Science, in continuing to make sure that students are feeling comfortable in this space. Orientation Week is here to orient students, both academically but socially, to this university. I think there's vital key holders that help out, with the exception of finers. The people who do live in residence, they have their residence dons, and they have to continue that introduction there as well. I believe computing has a buddy program along with engineering as well. Some of the smaller faculties do have these types of programs that I think are especially unique in terms of facilitating that transition to university, which can be really difficult. I understand that there's also programs like exchange buddies for people who are in exchange. You have the NEWTS orientation week as well, and I think these are all key in terms of making sure that orientation week is not just about the first week, but about your first year and your second year and third. I still get in contact with my GALES, and they still play a vital role. Like, they've wished me good luck for this campaign, and I do see them as people who helped me come to this university. And coming through first year, I think it's one of the most challenging situations that people can be put into, and we need to emphasize that strength in terms of having upper year students facilitate that transition to younger students, and it's something that I'm really passionate about and think of it.
Just additionally to Rico's point, I actually have been working recently with the university and also meeting with the Principal's Commission on Mental Health in terms of working on plans from the university and the AMS together to work specifically with students who don't live in residence. I was a first year not in residence as well, and we identified challenges of not receiving the same type of support that students receive from their dons, as well as looking at the transition from first to second year, because there is a large adjustment there for a lot of students who have lived in residence and now are moving out for the first time on their own. So we're really looking at plans, perhaps extending the kind of training and talks that you receive in orientation week into second semester or into the time when you're looking for houses and that kind of stuff, and really supporting initiatives such as those from the MAC when you work with students and talk about how to effectively find a house and find housemates and all that kind of stuff. These are really important initiatives to be supporting, because as the year goes on, your challenges change. The different aspects and issues at university that you're facing are different from that in orientation week. So those are really important things to be supporting as well.
Great, thank you for the question, Anjali. So to begin, I think I wanted to touch on the importance of Orientation Week itself and the importance that we feel in the autonomy of faculty orientation weeks. I know, having worked as a GALE and an OC actually myself, I think one value that's really well instilled in the orientation leaders is that once you're somebody's leader in orientation week, that doesn't end just in the week itself. That should continue all the way through one's university experience. And this is something that I think I can really attest to, and I guess to add kind of a personal touch to this, Mira was actually my GALE in my first year at Queen's. And she's somebody that I've stayed in contact with this entire time and obviously look up to very much so. So I think that's kind of a testament to how fantastic the weeks can really be. And it's really important that we protect that autonomy and ensure that this week is always student run. To kind of touch on the time after, to answer your question, Anjali, I think Doug was going to speak on that.
One of the things we touched on briefly in our platform is an outreach coordinator that would go under the HR office. It's just a brief sentence in our platform, but I'm going to talk about it now real quickly as time's running out. This is an outreach coordinator that would be in touch with different campus groups, clubs, floors, members of the Fine Arts program to let them know what the AMS can offer them, and not just extracurriculars and job opportunities, but also resources. What can the AMS offer in terms of academic resources? What can the AMS or even Queen's University offer in terms of mental health resources? And where can you go to find these things? The outreach coordinator would be in charge of that, but in addition, I think one of the small things that we can change in terms of the resources that we offer and how students reach that information is making small changes to the website so that if a student does come to the website, ams.org, and types depression in the search bar, the first thing that pops up is a resource. Health counseling, disabilities, services, here's the phone number. If a student walks in or if a student goes on their computer and types in failed class into the search bar, the first thing that pops up is the Academic Grievance Center. If a student goes on the website and types in alcohol, the first thing that pops up is the core. These are small changes we can make to condition the website to be more student-friendly, to let them know about these resources. Because you don't want an article about the history of mental health popping up. If someone's typing in mental health, it's very possible that they're experiencing it and they need help. So the first thing that needs to pop up is a resource, and that's something small and doable that can be done at any time. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for the great question. This sparked a lot of thoughts for me. In terms of at the faculty level, I come from concurrent education, which does this sort of thing really, really well. They're a small faculty, so that plays to their advantage in being able to do this. But they have intramurals. They do a lot of food drives and fundraisers. They go to a Con Ed camp, which I went to the first time this year, and I'm really sad that I missed it in my first 3 years. So that's from the faculty side of things in terms of those events. From a res and fine arts level perspective, I think that Dawn should continue to keep the culture of orientation alive throughout the year through holding different events and the like. That's something we do in fine arts. Every month we try and hold an event, and we try to hold different kinds of events so that they cater to as wide a variety of interests as possible, and making that a priority when you're training Dons, I suppose. And at the AMS level, the AMS has done a lot this year to really try and be more visible and to engage with students, including the housing map, the Infinitely Better website, the campus calendar, and things like Clubs Night, encouraging Dons to take their floor to the Clubs Night and that kind of thing. In terms of IT considerations, a lot of students use Google. They don't actually go to Queen's U websites first, so I think fostering those ties between basically essentially making Queen's U sites Google friendly is a good initiative to undertake. Thank you.
Thanks. All right. So my question is, pretend that I am the provost and that I am strongly against students running their own bar, and I want the AMS to shut down taps. Respond by defending your position as if this were a private meeting. So pretend that I am the provost and that I am strongly against students running their own bar, and I want the AMS to shut down taps. Respond by defending your position as if this were a private meeting. Which is the provost? And please, presidents, answer this question.
The question's directed to the president candidates, starting with RMS.
Good afternoon, Mr. Provost. Now, I'd like to point out to you all the wonderful things that the bars on campus do for students. It offers a lot of students jobs. It offers a place where students can go, if you're looking at the Queen's Pub, a place where students can go and grab dinner, a place where they can also drink casually amongst friends, and I don't really understand why you want to take that away. In terms of Alfie's, we are working on making it the special place for special events on campus, and in terms of Clark Hall Pub, it's also a wonderful place for people to meet one another, and I don't see why you're trying to destroy our community.
All right, thank you for the question, Nick. It's a good one. In terms of how we would approach this private meeting with the provost, I think the first thing I would ask would be, why is it that you want us to close down taps for this campus bar? I can't just go ahead and present my arguments without knowing what theirs is. So I would first listen and then create a knowledge and a list of why we think that we should be keeping TAPS intact. Some of those things that come to mind is we have student jobs, and it creates like hundreds of jobs for students, valuable experience outside the classroom. It's key for the Queen's education, being a part of working for these services. Another one of the things is we keep students close to home. They are safer here on campus than somewhere else outside of campus, so that's another key one right there. We have Queen's Student Constables, we have Queen's First Aid, we have different groups on campus that are providing the necessary services for students to feel safe on this campus, and there's not necessarily a single thread where students could not be safe within our pubs. So I would present those arguments to them, see how he responds to them, and then depending on how the meeting goes, bring them back to my team, bring them back to my council. What is it that we can do to convince the administration this is not happening? We would stand up for students, be strong. We won't obviously start yelling or anything like that, but we would be reasonable, listen to them, and present our ideas and remain strong. We want to do what students want, and we believe that students want to keep TAPS and pubs alive here on campus. It is necessary for students, keeping them safe, and we want to stress that to the provost.
I'm sorry, Mr. Provost, but I'm going to have to respectfully disagree with you. The Queen's Pub is an integral part of the AMS and the Queen's community. It is ingrained in history and has been here for almost 30 years and is part of the Queen's tradition. It takes a harm reduction approach and provides a safe place for people to drink in moderation. Not in excess, and it provides a safe environment. The AMS has taken the necessary safeguards to make sure that people don't drink in excess. We have student constables, we have staff that are trained for weeks to make sure that this doesn't happen, and ultimately we want to create the safest place on campus for students who would like to choose to enjoy a beer to be able to do so safely. The Kingston community can be unsafe at times, and we want to make sure that we give students a safe alternative for that as well. It is a social environment. It's not always about drinking. Sometimes it's about lunch, sometimes it's about dinner. And I think you're wrong to assume that the Queen's Pub is about over excessive drinking and that it's completely negative. With that said, I would be interested in hearing your concerns about TAPS in the Queen's Pub, and I'd be really interested in working with you in the future to find out what concerns you do have and addressing them if we do agree with you. Thank you.
This question is directed to GPP, although it would be great to hear from all teams if you're willing. So I am a volunteer with the Peer Support Center, and we know that all teams have indicated a plan for supporting student health and wellness on campus, and specifically for the Peer Support Center. Could you reiterate what your plans are, particularly why you feel that plan would be beneficial, and how you intend to make your plan happen? And as well, specifically to GPP, I am wondering whether in your plan to keep the center open until 2 a.m., you considered the safety of the Peer Support Center volunteers, both while they are at the center and in getting home after the center would close, keeping in mind that Walk Home closes by 2 a.m. most days of the week, and the Peer Support Center is open every day.
GPP.
Thank you for the question, Abe. So for everyone's knowledge, I am the current Social Issues Commissioner, so I do oversee the Peer Support Center. It is within my portfolio, along with 14 other committees and services. And within our platform, we expressed that we would like to do two things with the Peer Support Center. One is to have it open from 2 p.m. till 2 a.m., so 12 hours a day. It's currently open 3 p.m. till 1 a.m. And we'd also like to add support groups based on student feedback. The center currently runs, and they're just starting up at this point in the year, a depression and anxiety support group, as well as a grad student support group. We'd like to see that expanded. In consulting with students, we've had requests for an eating disorder support group, a grief support group, and various other ones that they're looking for. So that is the other aspect to it. In terms of the safety of the volunteers, this is a problem that other services run into as well, including Walk Home itself and our student constables. They are here quite late at night, and we often do provide taxi chits for them to arrive home safely, and that is definitely something that this service would be looking at. It's not a problem. The staff just is given a taxi chit that is paid for. They then use that to get home safely. So they would have that option, of course. We would never expect them to be walking home by themselves. What am I missing? There's another part. Why we think it would be good, why and how. So with that expansion, in consultation with students who use the service and students who would like to use the service, it's been expressed to me a lot by students that At that later point in the night is when they feel the most alone and when they're looking for the most support. And it is also when other resources in Kingston are greatly lacking. Most things are closed, and your options are mostly restricted to visiting a hospital or using one of the telephone lines, such as Telephone Aid Line Kingston, which is not the same as in-person peer support. So it is something that has been a request made to me. In terms of the support groups, I spoke with the support group facilitator who currently working at the center, who agreed that this would be an effective idea and something that they could definitely undertake. In terms of staffing the position, we had over 70 applicants in our fall hiring for the Peer Support Center, and I believe we hired about 50. I was involved with most of the hiring in terms of the managers and the other supports people earlier in the year. So there was a large pool of students. The center is fully staffed at this point, and on top of that, there is a reserve pool of students who are on call. So to add an additional 7 shifts a week would not be that huge of a burden. But of course, we are keeping in mind safety in the running of the center, and we would never expect them to be walking home alone. And in terms of the building, walk home is here up until the closing of the center, so it's not that the building would be empty at that point. So they would not be alone here. And we would also let campus security know to be doing extra rounds around the center at that time.
Would any other team like to respond to that? RMS.
Yeah, I just wanted to do a quick response to that because I really believe that it's a good idea to keep the Peer Support Center open later hours. I do see that there will be challenges with that, but like TK said, a lot of the other resources around Kingston are not available at those times. And having that resource available here in Kingston, or sorry, here at Queens, I think would be very valuable to students. I think the benefits far outweigh the challenges.
Any other responses? Yes, JDL.
Thank you for the question. So I'd like to say that I really do appreciate the consultative process that GPP went through in identifying needs that the Peer Support Center has. And they aren't necessarily things that we necessarily came up with in our own consultative process, and they're things that we would want to look into. Things that we did come up with was identifying a need to reassess the director's time commitment, especially if we were elected and we chose to open the Peer Support Center possibly to later hours. I think that would probably mean that the director might need to have an increased time commitment. And we'd also really want to reassess the space and financial resources of the Peer Support Center. The center has really expanded so much in the last year or two, and it's something that I think all of the volunteers that were part of that process really need to be commended. The Peer Support Center offers a service that I would argue the university can't, and that's peer counseling. There's so many reasons that a student might feel more comfortable going to a peer counselor, and we think that's really important to support the continued growth of the Peer Support Center. That being said, there are many reasons that a student at Queens might not need peer counseling and might need professional counseling. It's fundamentally the university's job to provide professional counseling. That's not something the AMS should do. And Team JDL is committed to supporting the growth of the Peer Support Center while taking that one step further and having an expanded commitment to mental health. It's in our platform that we really prioritize finding more space for health counseling and disability services. Dr. Mike Condra, who's the Director of Health Counseling Disability Services, HCDS, has repeatedly said time and time again that the service's greatest need, the greatest obstacle preventing HCDS from better serving the Queens community is space. He said that at AMS Assembly. He said that to us in meetings last semester and this semester as we spoke with him. And we really do have a very serious commitment to finding HCDS more space. Short term, if we were elected, we would start that process right away. Long term, obviously, it's in our platform that HCDS could find space when we do reopen the PEC. When we told that to Dr. Condra, his face just, I can't even explain it. He lit up and sort of melted and was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you put that in there. Thank you so much for thinking about what I've been saying over and over again. And he really appreciated that we took that into consideration. It's something that we would start on day one after getting elected. Thank you.
Rebuttal RMS.
I just wanted to add a quick point about this as well, because I do agree with what Mira said about HCDS needing more space. We also met with Mike Condra, and we believe there are more short-term plans that we can put in place to get them more space. In terms of counseling rooms, I think we could probably offer a couple spaces here in the JDUC where counselors could be available from HCDS directly to Council for Students. I think that's a real short-term goal we can look at doing right away. The PEC idea, it's a great idea, but I don't know if it's feasible, and I don't know if it can happen, so we really need to think short-term right now.
Rebuttal, JDL.
Thanks for all of those points. As I mentioned, if we were elected, we'd really start this process on day one. And we do recognize that reopening the PEC, is a long-term process. We know that this is a big project and it's a big challenge, and it's a challenge that we're willing to take on behalf of students. That being said, there are immediate mental health needs on campus, and I appreciate the sentiment that you just raised, which is this needs to be addressed immediately. And we would also be interested in, the AMS has a really strong lobbying voice to the administration, and it takes a strong executive to enact that power and to really make it clear to the administration that this is a priority, that HCDS finds more space. We would prioritize doing that short-term solution, and I think that it might be possible, as Sean said, to look at space in the, oh my gosh, you're counting down, short-term solution, finding space sooner. Thank you.
Hello. This question I would like addressed specifically by the presidential candidates. So the Social Issues Commission is frequently tokenized as the office responsible for equity and anti-oppression issues in the undergrad student community. AMS members often force this office into a role of educating students rather than of supporting them. Supporting members of our community dealing with experiences of oppression and marginalization. So this work is actually left on students at large, and it frequently goes unrecognized. How will you work to change this environment and make the AMS more responsible for supporting students facing oppression and marginalization on a day-to-day basis?
Starting with GPP.
All right, thank you very much for your question, Laura. Hopefully I understood it entirely. If I didn't, please let me know. In terms of the SIC being tokenized, I think it's something that we need to take into account is, as an executive, we shouldn't be taking the SIC necessarily as a source of information. I think that we need to be doing our own research as well and working with them. It shouldn't be just about what do you think in terms of equity. We should be working on that, and I think that in this team we have solid experience in terms of any equity issues within the Queens community and the greater Kingston community as well. So I think it starts by that. It shouldn't just be seen as the body that people go to in terms of whenever they have questions of equity, but we should also be working with them. We should be doing our own research as well and helping them as well as they help us. And so I'm hoping that answered your question. If not, let me know. Thank you.
JDL.
Thank you very much, Laura. And if you don't mind, I'm going to start by defining what I believe tokenization to be. I think tokenization is an attitude from a leader. It almost means to me that tokenization is the sentiment that this happens in that office, they're dealing with it, I don't have to worry about it, when in fact that's wrong. Especially when it comes to something as serious as social issues, this sort of thing needs to be ingrained in every leader, and it needs to be passed down from level to level to level. Everybody needs to know these kind of things, and they need to become second nature. With that said, JDL has a strong commitment to equity. We believe that it's an ongoing learning process, and I think first we need to recognize our own privilege. We need to recognize that we need to take a leadership role, and this needs to define an attitude of our team. One of the things that we learned when we talked to the Equity Office and the Human Rights Office of Queen's University is that the way to create a culture change, it needs to come from a leader. It needs to come from the top, and it needs to be filtered down. This isn't something that can start in one commission in the corner, although the Social Issues Commission is very important. It needs to start in all the offices of the AMS. It needs to start in every service. It needs to start in every committee. And it needs to become something that is so ingrained that talking about these issues becomes second nature and everybody is comfortable doing it. Like I said, tokenization is an attitude, and that attitude needs to change. Thank you very much.
RMS.
Thank you for the question. I'd like to commend Doug for his response there. I think that was a really, really good answer, and it's an important part of the process, really, to recognize your own positionality. In terms of anti-oppression workshops, I know TK has done a lot this year to really increase the frequency that they're done. This is not something you do once and you say, that's it, I'm good now. It's something it's ongoing process. You're continually learning to overcome the positionality that you recognize and be able to be inclusive of as many people as you can. and the whole community. So one idea that we had in terms of mental health first responders, we wanted to include that in the clubs conference. I think anti-oppression workshops is something you could also look at doing through club conference format, so that you could cast a wider net of people who are receiving these workshops and getting to know why it's important, why it matters, and why it needs to happen. Thank you.
Final question.
Hello. Considering rising tuitions for students and the student fees associated with the AMS, what would each team do to promote fiscal responsibility for its members by cutting waste and ensuring that the money students provide to the alma mater society translates into efficient services for them? In short, what could you do to reduce the AMS student fee and then work efficiently with smaller student fee revenues? Thank you.
Starting with JDL.
What's the question? I didn't hear the question.
Considering rising tuitions for students and the student fees associated with the AMS, what would each team do to promote fiscal responsibility for its members by cutting waste and ensuring that the money that students provide to the alma mater society translates into efficient services for them? In short, what could you do to reduce the AMS student fee and then work efficiently with smaller student fee revenues? Thank you.
Yeah, probably could do that.
JDL.
Yeah.
Great, thank you very much for the question. All right, so I'd like to begin actually by discussing the student fees that do exist at the moment. So we actually have a wide variety of different student fees. There's some mandatory, some optional. Some of our student fees go to funding the AMS organization, and others go towards clubs, external groups, even organizations outside of Queens. So your total student fees that you pay, including optional fees, would include in total about $900. Without the optional ones, it's almost $700. I think it's extremely important that we remain fiscally responsible to all of our constituents, which are the student body. One thing that I know I'm very committed to in this coming year, in the budgeting process alone, is ensuring that our $16 million budget is broken down as clearly as it possibly can be, so we can save money on small initiatives as well. So to kind of explain very briefly, I'll speak about one fee specifically. The AMS specific fee is about $68, and that goes towards Assembly's budget, which is then allocated across the commissions, the general office budget, as well as other expenses. One thing that's very important when we do budget is that we break down our line items as clearly as possible, so we can have the smallest possible amounts listed, so that we know exactly where every dollar is being spent in the end as well. It's extremely important that we do so, and I think this needs to be a constant process over many years to ensure that the AMS remains financially responsible to the entire student body, because people do pay a lot of money into this organization. As for reducing student fees, this is something that isn't technically within our executive control. It would have to go to referendum as well. But it's something that I think we really need to be careful to consider, that these student fees are a lot of money. And I know this past year there was actually a grant created, or a bursary, sorry, for students to cover their student fees. This is something we really want to lay out guidelines for in this coming year, given that it was new this past year, and to ensure that it is being given responsibly and that more people can access it as well. Thank you very much.
RMS.
Thank you for the question. In terms of what JDL said, I'd like to add, I think the heart of your question is not what people can opt out of, it's what they can't opt out of. And so what I'd like to say is that if we were elected, I would like to go through the mandatory fee line by line and then review it and see, okay, what are these expenses for? I'm not going to say that, I'm going to cut and slash or anything, but I would like to know, and I would like you to know. And in terms of other fees, I'd like to point out that this year the settlement with Queen's University over the Queen's Center, that's $144. That's not coming out of everyone's pocket next year. That's wonderful. And I hope that kind of process continues. Thank you.
GPP.
Thank you for the question. Again, I believe your question is mainly kind of driving towards the mandatory fees that we are made to pay through the AMS. So obviously some of our services are funded only by, or primarily by, student fees. So for example, Walk Home and Queen's Student Constables. For those services, we have to make sure we're trying to budget 4 to 0 or as close to 0 as possible. we don't really want to be seeing too much revenue being generated by those services, because again, if student money is going to that and it's producing revenue or like a surplus of money, that's not ideal and it's not a good use of student dollars. Also for AMS allocated funds, which is allocated by Assembly, which is used from our $68.80 specific fee, we have to make sure that we are effectively planning our initiatives and events in our commissions and on the society side of the government to ensure that we're using student dollars properly. If we can develop ways to plan better and use money better, I think we should definitely look at that. And overall, make sure that we're serving the student good as much as possible.
Rebuttal, JDL.
Great, thank you. I'm actually going to rebuttal myself right now. I can't believe I forgot to mention this. I wanted to draw my personal experience and how that will really help me in managing the $16 million budget and why you can trust somebody like me to do so. Last year, I was actually the head manager of Common Ground Coffee House, and in that 1 year, my team and I were able to increase Kogro's revenue by $200,000 up to over $1 million and reduce its deficit by $60,000. 2 years ago, Kogro's deficit was $84,000, which is the highest of any AMS service. This year, it will be making money. I think this is an incredible feat, and I know I can't attribute all that success to myself, but I did work very hard and have a lot of experience in this budgeting process. I think it would be really viable for me to apply that to budgeting for this $16 million corporation in the coming year as well. Thank you very much.
That concludes debate for the final elections debate. Clearly everyone here is informed and wants to participate in the process. Please tell your friends about the elections. Make sure that your friends vote. Tell as many people as you can to get out. The link to vote will be going out Tuesday morning. You can vote online. It's a really simple process. Campaign concludes Monday night, voting's Tuesday and Wednesday, and the results of the election will be announced Wednesday night. So with that, we'll move on to closing statements. We'll go in reverse order, starting with JDL, followed by GPP, and concluding with RMS.
Thank you very much, and thank you everybody for coming. It's been a long campaign, but it's not over yet. Before I started, I challenged you guys, and I presented you with some opportunities. I presented you with opportunities to create change. I presented opportunities for you guys to create growth, to make a difference, and to enrich your undergraduate experience. The need for a strong and passionate executive has never been greater. We have the attitude, we have the leadership, we have experience, and we have the passion that it takes to run this society. Don't think of this campaign as a team, or don't think of this executive as a team that's going to run the AMS for 365 days. Think of this as a team that's going to set the AMS up for a prosperous future for the next 5, for the next 10 years. We have short-term goals. We have short-term goals with long-term influence, and we have long-term goals. Please don't discount our ideas just because they say Team JDL on the page. We have tangible initiatives that are going to help out many campus groups. Health counseling and disability services, we are offering 500 additional hours of counseling. Think about that for a second. We are offering a salad bar at Common Ground because we care about the health and wellness of our students. We are offering a blue light app because we care about their safety. We do care, and we have the passion to get these things done. Don't vote for today, vote for tomorrow, vote for the future. You're not just electing a platform, you're electing an executive. And we have the passion, we have the experience, and we have the leadership that it takes to run this society. Thank you very much.
All right, so first of all, I would like to just thank everyone who's here, the rest of the teams. It's been an amazing experience, and I couldn't have been here without the help of all the volunteers and the help of everyone who's been a part of my Queen's experience here, and I can know that TK and Duncan can testify to the same thing. I think one thing that I would like to close with is that it's been an extremely amazing experience running for this position. We've learned so much about how this university works, how the AMS works, and we've done and we've created a platform that is fiscally responsible, that can be achieved within 1 year. It is something that we're not afraid to dream big, but we're also down and being realistic. We know how things work, we also have the experience, and we know that we can do the things that we're promoting. A little story, we actually thought about basically increasing the space in the Queen's Pub. And this is something we're telling some of the people. But then when we found out the actual cost of doing that, we decided not to promise that because we realized that it was not within our reach. We didn't want to charge students more money than what they've already contributed to. All of the projects that we've been committed to, the 15 platform points that we have, they can be achieved within our year, and it is something that we have the money and the capability to do next year. So think about that when you're voting. Research all the platforms. There's really a lot to read. There's really strong points in all three of the teams, and there's weaknesses and strengths in all of us. So definitely do your research. I think that we are up for the challenge. We're up for the challenge of incorporating students. We're not afraid of keeping open office hours and receiving criticism and receiving feedback, even if it's negative. We want that. We want students to come to our offices and tell us, you're doing this wrong and we want to change. We want to include as many people as possible. The AMS is a wonderful institution, but it should be about every student. Think about the 14,000 students that are here in this university, and think about how many of them are actually involved with the AMS. We want to be reaching out to as many students as possible, and I think this is why we are very passionate about running this campaign, and this is why we want to be your AMS executive next year. We're up for the challenge. We've dealt with the administration in the past before. We want to continue doing that. We want to continue representing students. We've done it in the past, and I seriously tell you that we can do it next year with the AMS. So seriously consider that. Think about what the AMS means to you, where you want it facing forward, and come to our booth and tell us, I want this out of your AMS, and we'll look at that and we'll take that into account. It's not just about our platform and what we want. We've tried to include as many points as possible from the different clubs, organizations, and people that we've met with in the past few months, but we want to hear your voice as well. So for all the people who are out there as well, if we haven't talked to you, come by our booth, tell us what you want out of your AMS because we want it as well. Thank you very much, and thanks for coming here, and have a good night.
RMS.
What does it mean to be the president and CEO of Alma Mater Society? It means to be the face of your student government, someone who has earned your trust through hard work and integrity, and will work in your best interests. It means to be an advocate for you on Senate and in a large number of committees whose decisions affect not only you, but the students of tomorrow. It means to steward the government and corporate sides of the AMS, to be a responsible leader who can make the difficult call. It also means to be an approachable peer, someone who values criticism, questioning, and feedback as critical steps in the process of decision making. In my performance review for finers with Student Affairs and Residence Life, I was told my approach in working with student affairs during the planning process and throughout the year was an ideal model. Together we built a strong working relationship where the administration becomes a resource and an advisor. I believe strongly in the power of empathy and listening. I believe in the importance of reciprocity and making it clear to the administration where students are coming from and why their perspective matters to gain the attention of the administration. I believe the administration is in difficult financial trouble and is thrust into a position of making even more difficult calls moving forward. We're living in a time of degree inflation and continuously increasing enrollment, a time when less with less sounds all too real. I believe a strong union of AMS citizens is vital to the survival of this community we care so much about. The ideal we work towards is participatory democracy, where discussion, free flow of information, and inclusivity are of utmost importance. We must invite participation as opposed to just allowing participation. The $1.2 million gift we have been given is money that was taken from students and is now being given back. Apart from critical changes such as giving the Peer Support Center a bigger and more confidential space, we want your say to determine how and how much of the money that we will spend in our term. I believe wholeheartedly that a platform contains a diverse number of points, and a vote should not mean that you consent to all those points wholesale. We wrote our platform to be personal and structured it as a conversation of talking points with our peers. We have run our campaign without a campaign manager to gauge student opinion on key issues, and will not lose sight of that if we take office. When I set foot in the JDUC for the first time, never in my wildest dreams would I have imagined being on this stage tonight. I am honored to raise my hand for the change I think needs to happen, and I am honored to share this stage with Sean Renault and Briar Sneffula. I encourage you to check out our website, www.voterms.com. Follow us on Twitter @VoteRMS, and to write on our banner in the coming days, vote on January 31st and February 1st. Let your voice be heard. Don't let university pass you by. Vote RMS. Vote for a student government for you, made by you. Thank you.
That concludes the final debate. I would encourage you, Amanda Judd, the AMS Communications Officer, is sitting next to the PNCC. She has information available on volunteering with the Alma Mater Society, part-time jobs and full-time jobs. So if you're interested in any of that, she would be happy to answer any of your questions. So let's just give the candidates a round of applause. Thanks for coming, everyone.